Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. Scott Linden here. Glad you could join me. Fascinating discussion to take place today. One of only 5 women who has won an national amateur field trial in the Springer Spaniel world. And her dog was also voted the dog that the gunners in the trial would most like to hunt with. Now, that doesn't happen very often. In fact, it's never happened before. So we'll learn a lot from Camie Barrow and also from Jim Keller of Wildwind Kennels, who has been helping Camie and her dog Bailey on this long-running campaign that has paid off in so many ways. If you want to learn more about how to handle a dog in the field, in a field trial, or anywhere else in a hunting situation, well, they'll have advice for us. We'll also talk about what you used for technology in the field, and then we'll go to New Mexico for a public access quail opportunity or two, so stick around for all of that. First off, just back from snowy, cold, and very productive northern Nevada. Had a great time down there. One of my favorite places. That was a place we were supposed to go for opening weekend, and we couldn't for some kind of dumb reasons, but nothing that big a deal. Just glad to finally pull it off and get down there again. The darkest part of the lower 48 states. And my buddy Dave brought his really fancy telescope, and we had a new moon. So can you imagine what you could see with a good telescope when there's no moonlight? Yeah, it was incredible. Have you ever really seen the Milky Way? It's spectacular. But enough about me. How about you folks? What are you doing these days? Speaking of Nevada, Jeffrey Kimura shot his first rough grouse in Nevada. Talk about odd situations. That's one of them. You just don't put that bird in that state. But of course, there's mountains all over. I've been to some of them. Bruce Wondrek's Hannah, English setter, found her first prairie chicken in South Dakota. Fantastic. Jay Gnetner, I hope I pronounced that right, Jay. Looks like you got a wire-haired pointing griffon and some good-looking birds in your arms there. Shane Rugg, a whole pile of friends and dogs. A little bit high up there. I hope you had a good time in that beautiful high knoll with some snow-capped mountains in the background. It looks like you had some success. And I'm a little jealous. There's no snow on the ground in any of these shots. Rob Sykes has got a... there's the goose is so big I can't hardly tell. Is that a... well, let's open it up and see. Yeah, it looks like a retriever, but I can't tell for sure. Is that a Labrador or not? Whatever it is, good-looking retrieve there, and I can only imagine how heavy that bird is compared to that dog, which seems to be a little bit on the small side, at least in that photo. Well, it looks like you're all getting out and having a good time, and that's what matters, so good on you. We're made possible in part by Sage and Praker Gun Care Products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, and FurFeathersFriends.com. Well, if you're like me, you're always thinking about warmer, drier places to go towards the end of the season, and I know we're nowhere near the end yet, but if it if it helps to plan ahead a little bit, here's your chance. Head for New Mexico if you're looking for bobwhites. Yeah, bobwhite quail around the Pecos River region, even a bit further south along the Texas border. Just look for mixed brush and grasslands. There's so much BLM ground out there. I've roamed some of it, and I can't wait to get back. Next time I'm there, Mearns quail are high on the list. I'm headed for Catron County, the Cibola National Forest, the San Andres Mountains, and the Sacramento Mountains is where the population is most concentrated. That's down in the south central part of the state. If you are looking for that kind of advice, well, I've got more of it, including state-by-state and species-by-species information at findbirdhuntingspots.com. We're brought to you by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. I've talked about the Pro Shop and all the great gear they have, and I am so grateful that they have it for a whole bunch of reasons. I'm always stocking up there, and glad that they will ship anything from their Pro Shop pages at midvalleyclays.com quickly and efficiently. You know, they're also a major source of Browning shotguns, and Browning has one of the most complete lineups of shotguns for upland game hunters. Well, you know the Satori. Now it's available in a Featherlight model, among others. Some of the most venerable shotguns in the world are those Browning Satoris. Several lines of autoloaders at various price points, and they also have a pump gun or two if you're looking for an opening gambit for a new hunter, for example. Learn more about their selection at midvalleyclays.com. And then once you've got your gun, whether it's new or old, outfit it completely with some Trulock Chokes. I spell Trulock, Trulock, trulockchokes.com. All sorts of resources there. Remember that one of the simplest ways to improve your shooting is to use good choke tubes. And there are all sorts of incentives at trulockchokes.com. You can get a free choke tube case, free shipping, 10% off, depending on how you order and how much you order. Take a look at all of the choke tube opportunities there for any kind of gun and any kind of ammo at trulockchokes.com. Well, I'm so glad to have Camie Barrow with me, and soon Jim Keller of Wild Wind Kennels will be joining us as well. At least that's our fervent hope. Camie, if you know that name, it's probably because last November she won the U.S. National Amateur English Spaniel Field Trial Championship in New York. Camie and her Springer Bailey won the national title as well as the Gunners Award, given to the dog the contest gunners would most likely want to hunt with. Now there's an achievement. Camie Barrow, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
What was the feeling when that all happened? I mean, I'm lucky to get through a hunt test, let alone win anything. That's got to be, well, like the Oscar of the dog world.
It's a year in, and it's still sinking in.
Wow, that big. Does it change the way you look at your dog?
No, because you still know when you're having a good run versus when things aren't going quite right.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that was so special about that national was the fact that we strung together 5 series, and each series was just its own really cool, moment in time where we were working together really well as a team.
So you were in the zone in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you say series. What describe that to us? 5 in a row. I mean, is that like a whole day or is that a whole week?
That is over a week.
Yeah.
Basically, because there were, I can't remember how many. There were about 100 dogs in the competition.
Wow.
And so, everybody starts in the first series, and then the numbers get whittled down over the course of a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a regular trial, far smaller numbers, and it'll be 3 series in a day.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be nerve-wracking in itself, because every day, by the end of the day, whether you're moving on or not, right?
Well, it usually takes until the judges have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so it'll take a couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And usually by 7 or 8 that night, you'll know if you're coming back the next day.
Wow. Well, just describe the whole field trial spaniel thing to us. There are a lot of folks who've never attended one. Those who may have attended a pointing dog trial or even a retriever trial for that matter. But the spaniel thing is a little bit different in some ways, isn't it?
It is. These guys are flushing dogs. And so basically you go out and you're set up with a brace mate, and you have a center line, so you each have your own side of the course. And the dogs are judged on their use of wind, their courage under cover, their boldness of flush, and their marking and retrieving skills, as well as how well they work with the handler. And, you know, in addition to all of that, they have to respect what's going on the other side of the course. So you'll have, oh, go ahead.
Well, so they got to work together in some way, don't they?
The handler and the dog have to work together.
Right. And there, we hope, is Jim joining us.
Yes, sir.
Hey, good. We're on the air, Jim, so hang loose. So, Camie, you were saying the dog and the handler obviously have to work together closely, but what about that other dog?
You know, as I was saying, we have to be respectful.
Yeah.
Of that other dog. So if they put up a bird and are on a retrieve, you know, my dog has to sit down and not interfere, stay out of the way, and let that other dog do their thing.
That's got to be as hard as anything else. I know in the pointing dog world, getting a dog to honor another dog's point is one of the bigger challenges at a high level. Can you train for that?
You certainly can reduce the level of risk that's involved with something going wrong with your dog.
Yeah.
And there are certain things you can't train for. You know, if a bird is accidentally put right in front of your dog that's trying to be good and honor the other side, I mean, there is some luck, but, you know, Jim always talks about the basics. You teach your dog to hup or sit. You teach them to come, you teach them to heel, and if you can get all of those locked in, you should be fine.
Yeah, and that's a good cue for you, Jim. Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast, Jim Keller of Wild Wind Kennels. Now, the reason Jim is with us today is Jim worked closely with Camie as a pro trainer to get Bailey to this level. And Jim, number one, how's the drive going?
Well, we just actually we came out early to help prepare for the U.S. National Open. It's going to be held in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we just pounded out 2.5 days or 3 days of driving to get out here, and so we can prep the dogs up and all that. And that'll be starting for the next 5 days, and then the Nationals are 5 days after that. So.
That's a long pull for a guy like you. How many dogs you got in the trailer with you?
We actually have, trying to think, we have 7 total that are going to run in the National Open.
Yeah.
And I think 8 total that will run in the National Amateur. So.
Wow.
And some of them are running in both, as Camie's dog is as well.
Yeah, so you're probably the best guy to describe the difference between the Open and the Amateur. Why don't you give us a quick description of the difference between those two?
Well, dog-wise and even handler-wise is really no difference. The only distinction is in the Open, anybody can run that's qualified, of course, whether it be an all-age stake or whether it be at the Nationals or what have you. And the amateur stakes are strictly for non-professionals. So, but that being said, there's been numerous times where amateurs have compete very, very well and have beaten and done very well. And I think that goes to a lot of reasons. But there's one of the biggest reasons is that there's some darn good amateurs out there, you know. And
yeah.
It's more about the dog and the relationship with the person with the dog, and that's really, really important. So,
well, you know, you bring that up, and you know, it seems like every other week I'm talking to somebody about that relationship between the dog and the handler, and it could be the owner handler, it could be a pro trainer, it doesn't matter. But what are the things that are important in that, Jim?
In the relationship with the dog, as far as okay, I see. Yeah, basically the biggest thing is any dogs. I mean, I've trained all breeds over the years, but I'll speak to Spaniels since that's what we're discussing. But But building a relationship with an animal is really something special, and as you're developing, we train dogs for other people too. So we've got to get the dog to where not only it knows its tasks, but it's also well socialized and works for other people and all that. I think part of that, of course, is there's probably a number of components, but part of it is that biddability factor where dogs want to please. Yeah. That's the reason why we have them. Mm-hmm. It's so you like to have that, and so you build relationships based on trust and consistency, and being fair with them. Yeah. And that's probably the biggest thing. It's not super complicated. It's like people, you gotta earn the dog's trust, but they're looking for it too,
Yeah, I do. In fact, somewhere in a book I wrote a while back, I mentioned a dog trusting humans and being fair, the human having to be fair to the dog, and that dogs know it when you're not fair. How would you define that? I mean, it's not the same as, a relationship with a human being. So we want to be fair to a dog. What does that mean in practical terms?
Well, there's a lot of things that come to mind from my thinking is fairness to the dog is never expecting it to do something you haven't trained it to do. Mm-hmm. And once you've trained them to do it, it would be unfair if you allow them to not do it sometimes and to do it other times. Yeah, that would actually be very unfair. And I think that's probably where most people will break down. The inconsistency in their expectations of what they expect the dog to do. Yeah. Or, there's a guy, the name of Rex Carr, you probably have heard of. Mm-hmm. He's the retriever guru who's passed away some time back, but he's kind of like the founding father of the modern day training in the retriever world, and certainly it's leaked over into spaniels and other breeds as well. They tell a story about when he was watching. He was a really great coach, and he was watching somebody run their dog, and the person was getting really, really upset with the dog, and he stopped it right there, and he said, "You shouldn't be upset with the dog. You should be upset with yourself. Either you didn't teach them properly, or you didn't enforce your standard, or what have you. But anytime that animal breaks down, it's not because of anything less than that's your responsibility, not theirs." Operator error. Yeah, well, to a point, right? Yeah. And he said either you didn't teach it well enough, or you haven't proofed it, or whatever, I guess is what we use for a term, proofing response, Yeah,
I want to talk about that with Camie, because it's one thing, I joke about it, but it's true. Back when I was in the music business, you can be the best player in the entire universe in a practice room, but at some point you got to walk out onto the stage and prove it. Camie, where does that come to the fore with a dog in a field trial or even a hunting situation? What are the ways that a dog actually is being proofed when they're out there?
Well, I mean, you do the proofing before you get out there. Yeah. Hopefully. Uh-huh. I guess if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's knowing, it's the trust factor. Yeah. Really, is you go out to the line knowing that you trust your dog and that he's going to respond the best way he knows how to. And, to Jim's point, right or wrong, he's going to try to do, or at least my dogs try to do the best that they can. And, Bailey has a nose that sometimes can get the better of him because he's a big running dog and his nose will take him down the field. Oh. But he has to trust that he'll get a bird if he stays with me. And he's not going to get a bird if he doesn't. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world, and hopefully we're all trying to convey that or train it or whatever you want to call it. What about just the overall when you're at the line and the judges are ready to cut you loose? What goes through your mind right before you're ready to start that trial?
Well, I mean, Jim has a few little isms that he likes to have the people that are training with him hold to. One is holding the standard.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that Bailey is lined up the way I want him to be lined up, and that he's not trying to take a little ground on me or trying to tell me which way he wants to go. I want him to wait for me to tell him which way I want him to go. And, once that's established, I smile at my dog. I check the wind, and we're on our way. And we take what comes as it comes.
And how long is each of these runs at this level? How long are you in the field?
If I'm having a good day, it's really quick.
Oh, really?
I generally judge how well I'm doing by how quickly Bailey's finding the birds. And so if he gets his 2 birds, because every series you get 2 contacts,
mm-hmm.
and if he's in there finding them, making the retrieve, and we're in and out, then we're having a good day. If it's taking longer to find the birds, or he's, running off course a little bit, trying to track something out, it's just something we have to work through, but probably doesn't look as good to a judge.
Is that because, there are birds in there and we all know where they are, sort of, and they should be able to find them fairly quickly?
I mean, yes, but also a lot of things change day to day.
Yeah.
As an amateur, we're running the day after the pros run.
Uh-huh.
So there are lots of extra birds.
Mm.
It'll depend on the cover and how the birds are planted. It'll depend on the weather, whether the birds start moving. So, I mean, there are a lot of factors there.
Jim, what goes through your mind when you're handling a dog for somebody else? I can't imagine it's got to be to a great degree like a trainer and a jockey rolled into one running the Preakness.
Yeah, well, what I try to do is to Camie's point, have a plan. You're observing. A lot of times there's your people are chatting with you. It's a very social type of event in a lot of ways, and you try not to be rude, but you're going ahead. And I mean, for me, I'm listening, but it's a little bit more. I'm paying attention, but I've learned over the years how to make sure that I'm paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to be aware of what the wind's doing. I've been watching the dogs ahead of me. To see how they're finding their birds, which direction they're finding their birds. If I can tell, getting a cadence for how aggressive folks are hitting the course. I'm trying to take all that data in at the same time before I get up there, and then there's what I call free test questions, which are if you're kind of watching. I mean, our sport, the sport for spaniels is they're putting birds out along, they're putting them out in front.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to get a feel for where how far off they are. Because sometimes if depending upon the scenting and stuff, but your dog might be tempted to go perhaps on the other course, which is a bad thing. And, I'm also seeing, okay, are they putting, the birds more outside? Because that's your starting point. It doesn't mean that's where the bird's going to be, but at least it gives you an idea as to where things kind of are. And all that data for me is like I said, a free test question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to there's a lot of variables that can happen outside of that, but I'm trying to just take it all in. And then really you connect with the dog, like Camie said. You connect with him, and connecting means I want to walk him up and have them fairly relaxed, or in some cases with a dog, I actually may want them being a little antsy because I may want to, have them just, the whole process is you want to have a really cool animal that's out there and showing off exactly why you brought them there.
Yeah.
There's only a certain percentage of dogs that have the that have the ability or perhaps even the opportunity to run in these type of events. So, obviously we're choosing dogs that we really feel have the ability and the skills. And then our job is to train them to that level. And then, so you want to show that off. So my good saying is you want to let them get out there and do great things, but under control.
Yeah.
And so, that's the thing that, when you first imagine yourself seeing a spaniel or a pointer or a retriever do different things, you go ahead and you want to, the things that make you excited about why you got involved in that is what you want to show. And so that's you're putting on a show, but at the same time you're trying to show off all the skill sets.
I do.
Yeah.
Not that I could do it, but I understand what you're talking about. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast. Jim Keller is with Wild Wind Kennels. He collaborated with Camie Barrow. Bailey was the subject of their collaboration. Bailey is an incredible Springer Spaniel, won the National Amateur Spaniel Field Trial Championship, and also, just for the record, Camie is one of only 5 female handlers to claim that national title. We'll be talking to Jim and Camie more in just a couple minutes. First off, let me just remind you that we are brought to you in part by sageandbreaker.com. One of the many things I never leave home without is the Sage and Breaker modifiable boar cleaning kit. That boar snake? Well, this one's even better. It's been improved in many ways. The brush is detachable. All the components are designated by the gauge. So if you're like me and you're dragging 2 or 3 different gauge shotguns along, you know which of your boar cleaning kits is for which shotgun. Find out more about all of those products and get on the mailing list for the very rare sales. You'll find out about them first at sageandbreaker.com. And welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. We've got Jim Keller of Wild Wind Kennels and Camie Barrow, handler, owner, and probably very good friend of Bailey, the Springer Spaniel. Camie, what do you think Bailey likes most about this whole field trial game?
The birds.
Yeah? Pretty simple, huh?
It's pretty simple. He's a bird dog.
Good.
I think things going there, if I may, Camie. You got Bailey loves birds, Bailey loves Camie, and Bailey likes food.
You forgot the couch. He also really enjoys the couch.
Oh, gosh.
Yep.
Well,
you bet.
Well, you can't carry a couch around as a reward or praise, but you can carry food around. I mean, do you use that sort of thing? How do you motivate a dog? What are the praise actions or items that you two use when you're trying to get Bailey to the highest level?
I mean, it really just starts with a good boy.
Yeah.
And telling him when he's doing the right thing, and Bailey and all of the spaniels we've had have been really, really driven by that. They want to do the right things, and they want to make you happy. And so just that little bit of praise makes a huge difference. So you can't overdo it all the time. Like, it has to be doled out in proportion to the task that the dog has been asked to do. Yeah. But then you can throw in some treats, but we don't do that too much past the puppy stage. Uh-huh. And then birds. A lot of birds.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to say, and we all have a version of no birds, no bird dog. But what does that mean in a training scenario? I mean, does that mean frequent contact? Does that mean he gets to retrieve often? Or is it all of the above, or is it something I'm missing out on?
Jim, do you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think that the dogs get enjoyment from finding birds, and the spaniels, obviously, the spaniels get enjoyment from finding the birds, but they also get enjoyment from retrieving those birds.
Yeah.
And so there's a mix there.
Yeah.
And some dogs are incredibly retrieve driven. Some dogs are incredibly more flight driven.
Mm.
Most of your spaniels I've found over the years have a tendency to be a mixture of both. And that's why they do what they do so well. I mean, their primary, if you had to, I hate to pigeonhole a spaniel into just one type of bird, but one of the things that has really been one of the defining things that they do exceptionally is taking track on pheasants.
Yeah.
And pheasants, of course, love to run. And so their job is to put enough pressure on that bird to get it in the air. And then when they get it in the air, to be, hopefully, you want to see that done within range, of course, and then mixture of training and stuff that happens for that. But so I think there's motivational factors on that end of it a lot. And like a good pointing dog gets a lot of satisfaction out of sitting there and pinning a bird.
Yeah.
Retrievers get a lot of satisfaction, out of and really incredible drive, and all their skill sets have been designed over the years, or that's what's been developed. They can see things at depth that it rivals the human eye, if not better than the human eye in some ways. And so, our spaniels really, that's what they like to do. To me, it's a mixture of tempering it out to where they want to do it with you. And that's really, really important. That's really, really important. So I think that when they want to do it with us, that's what makes that bond even more special.
There's a trainer here in Nevada here. They're in Nevada. I'm in Oregon. But he's really changed my thinking a lot about how to do all that. And one of his philosophies is that the dog needs to understand that if the dog wants a bird, whatever aspect of it the dog likes, he's got to look to the human for that. The human is the source of all birds in one way or another. And, I'm not deep into his philosophy, but it starts to make sense that, in a pointing dog, I see how you might be able to do that. In a spaniel, where the birds are planted out there, the dog has no idea where it is until he uses his nose. What do you do to convey, especially to a young dog, that hey, trust me on this, there will be a bird out there? I mean, is it simply a matter of repetition, Jim?
Well, the biggest thing is because the spaniels typically they're obviously a strong quartering dog.
Yeah.
And so what we end up doing is that early on in our training, I mean, it's funny, you take out a puppy and they naturally want to quarter. They love to quarter. That's their thing, right? You can hardly, they love it and they want to do it. So what we do is we accentuate it a little bit, teach them that they can quarter from side to side and be with us. And that's really good. And we want to see that and encourage it. And then what we do is we go ahead and really try to develop that relationship that they find birds. Camie mentioned this earlier, that they're finding birds with us.
Yeah.
We put birds in places that as they're young, they go ahead and we want them to find their birds on their own, because you have to develop that part of it. And then as time goes on, the interesting part is you actually have to temper that with finding it with you, which may be when you're running them on birds, you may want to put that dog in position to find birds. Now, hunting is totally different because we're totally reliant upon the dog. The only difference is we may put them in places that we say, well, they didn't cover this enough. We want to go ahead and get them in there and cover it a little more, or maybe cover wider or whatever. But in training, what we end up doing is you develop that kind of that trust to be with you and trust in you and to stay with you. But early on, we're actually encouraging almost the opposite. We're encouraging them to go out there and find them on their own, And then you temper it out by putting birds in places where they'll find them with your help too. So that they kind of go ahead and go, oh, okay, I need the guy with the gun or the whistle or whatever,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
You know, if I've got an animal that's perhaps getting a little bit too big, I may, if I have birds out or whatever, I may go in the opposite direction. And once they're kind of settled in, then I kind of start moving towards where that bird was.
Yeah.
So they learn to just kind of be with you because that's the right place to be.
Love it. Camie, when you're training without Jim, when you know, most of the time you're probably working with your dog yourself. What are the biggest things you work on a frequent basis?
Really basic obedience, honestly, and it's the consistency factor that Jim talked about at the beginning of the conversation. You know, learning to be fair with the dogs, and so that they trust me and they know what to expect from me every time. Whether it be, you know, sitting before they get their food, sitting before they go out the door, you know, all of that is a big part of what I do. And when I am training on birds, and all that's done without birds, we do placeboard work with dummies out in the yard. And then when I am at Jim's, you know, doing bird work, it is important for me because this is one of those points that transitioning between Jim and myself, I can only get my voice to drop so many octaves before. You know, sometimes I need a little extra motivation for Bailey to be like, oh yeah, I have to listen to you too. And so I keep birds in my field belt, pull them out, drop them in front of me. Or, you know, if he puts up a bird and didn't do exactly what I wanted him to, I'll go take the retrieve away. Yeah. And I'll go pick that up so he doesn't get it unless I let him.
So again, there you go. I mean, birds are the reward, and only when it's earned. It's very obvious in a situation like that. What about the gear that you've always got with you? You just mentioned a field belt, for example, and you're carrying birds in it a lot of times. But when whether it's hunting or at a trial, there are probably things you wouldn't leave home without. What are they?
My field belt would be one. Water bottles. We have, you know, a leash that's got a little bit more, I guess, tensile strength to it. So it's a little easier to give a correction if you need to.
Okay, I think I understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
And that's basically it. Room for the birds to put them in the belt, you know, in the belt once I get them back.
Yeah. Jim, how about on the training side? Camie mentioned the place board. You've got other things that you probably use. Any of them that we've never thought about that might become handy for us?
So, I mean, there's a lot of equipment that we use in our bag for training. I mean, but I try to be pretty simplistic. I've come to really appreciate the real light 1/4 inch flat leads that are kind of like almost a rubbery flat lead. Yeah. That I really like. We've gotten those from, I don't know if I can say the place we've got them from or not, but we've gotten them from different sources. And those are really, really handy. I like them because the dogs don't get hung up on them. For spaniels or any dog of any nature, I like, it's not necessarily training, but certainly care, is the mat rakes. Yeah. That are really, really important, whether you've got a setter or spaniels or even labs, I guess, that get them perhaps. But the whistles, the Acme 210.5s are kind of my preferred whistles. I don't like a lot of complexities in training because it's just, I kind of like the simplicity. I don't use bells. I do train with the e-collars, but my e-collars are very simple. They're not complex. I don't need a lot of high rising and all the different stuff, and that's fine. I can understand a purpose for it. The place boards are perhaps the most simplistic thing that I found for obedience, and you can use it for so many different things. There's a company that developed a really cool plastic board that I really like a lot because they're lightweight and they're just really good. Cato Boards out of Wisconsin is they do a great job with those and anyway put out that, and that's, but no, I'm not real. I don't like a lot of stuff. I like to just keep it pretty simple.
Yep, you and your dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and really, when you were talking about, what I think about when I go up to the line, it's just me and the dog, and it's very simple.
Yeah.
We just go out there and do our thing, and that's, sometimes I get stuck because the dogs just go out there and start working beautifully, and I have to remember to keep up, but it is just that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. We do tend to make things a little bit more complicated quite often, and it probably manifests itself in the wrong ways when you get into a high stress situation like a field trial. Have you ever, Jim? You might be the one to tell us about this. You ever seen a handler, amateur or pro, do something completely and totally crazy that none of us should ever do anywhere?
Well,
it's only an hour-long show, so narrow it down.
I get it. I've seen all of us make mistakes. I mean, and one of the things that's really important in dog training or even in field trials is you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah,
it's going to happen, and if you do it over and over and over again in training, then you're gonna have problems. That's where you get confusion from the dogs, right?
Yeah.
But in a trial, if you make mistakes, well, I guess that happens and stuff. And I've made my share too. Most of the time, even in training or in trial, I liken the whole sport. This reminds me a lot of really of fly fishing, because there's so many little intricacies. There's so many little things that you can play with,
mm-hmm.
and you can get better at this part, and then you got to tone up this part and understand a little more. You can build your own flies. You got a lot of different venues that you can go. But what it really comes down to, when you're going hunting or whether you're at a field trial, it's just going to be simply you and your rod or you and your dog. And you're going to make mistakes. It's part of life. Somebody told me a long time ago, get over it. It's not fair. It's just is what it is. But, but learn from it and try to surround yourself with people that will challenge you and make you better, just like anything, right?
Yeah.
And, just if you go at it with that type of attitude, and if you as a pro trainer, the only reason why my job primarily is because somebody doesn't have the time or the place or the knowledge, or a combination of all three. And so what ends up happening is, if you're surrounding yourself and you're really good at observing and watching and then doing, the old adage, then you can figure out a lot of stuff. And it's going to take just time in the saddle. It's what we call free throws. You got to go to the free throw line, and you got to make the easy stuff look very easy. You got to make the complex stuff look good too.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's just skill sets, And
you're talking about what I would call sports psychology, and that's a good transition. Camie, you learned a lot about dog psychology from Jim. What are one of the lessons you learned?
Oh boy. Dog psychology. Really, that have to be consistent and, treat them fairly. And if I treat them fairly and I'm a positive influence for them, then they respond to that very positively. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't do the harsh style of training, or anything like that. And, I will say one of the things that has probably been one of the more difficult things for me is, when Bailey's with Jim, he's on point. He understands what's going to be happening, what's expected of him. When he comes home and he's with me 24/7, there's a whole lot more room for me to be not consistent.
Yeah.
And so I used to call it the hotel happy syndrome.
Yes.
And it's a thing. It's so easy to slide into. But in order to keep Bailey sharp, psychology, any other way you want to think of it, I have to be fair. So the same rules have to apply in the house as they do in the field.
I had that revelation on a 3-day return drive from South Dakota recently. You hunt hard for 4 or 5 days and the dog is on, like you said. And then for 3 days, you're just kind of lolling around in the truck and everything goes out the window. It's so easy, isn't it?
It's so easy.
Well, maybe we should be wearing the e-collar.
I won't. No.
Scott, may I tell you a quick story?
Yeah.
I one of the things that was so it was so cool. I had the opportunity to watch last year, and I've seen Camie mature as a handler and getting to understand, and these things don't come easy. They don't come without sacrifice. And what was so cool, because it was so special, because when you do those type of things that she did last year, she has had that happen in other trials and done very well, or maybe have it happen in a series, or maybe 2 series, or maybe 3 series. But what was so cool, because it was over 5 days, and one of the things that we do in pre-national training is, and Camie will tell you this, is we try to push the folks and the dogs a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We try to get them to where things are just more automatic and thinking and more muscle memory. And what was so absolutely cool is I saw Camie in a zone throughout that whole time that's so hard to get to. And that goes back to your sports psychology a little bit. And I've even mentioned it to Camie this year. I said, be that kid, and I call her a kid. She's not a kid. But I said, be that kid that I saw in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was just, that's where you all strive to get to. It's hard to get to. Sometimes you're faking like you're there,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in your gut, you're going, I'm a little off on this. The dog's just a hair off. To watch that last year was so cool. Camie was, I think you could have put ice on her forehead and it wouldn't have melted. It was just so cool.
Well, yeah. Camie, how do you get to that point? I mean, it happens on the drive in, I'm sure, and then it happens as you're preparing. Jim talked earlier about, trying to be polite and listen to people and talk to people, but really you're gauging the wind, you're looking at the other dogs, you're doing all. Is there a mantra?
It doesn't matter. That was what was in my head for an entire week. Yeah. Bailey and I walked through 6 inches of mud, and he was at a heel the entire time. Every time a gun went off, he sat, because that's what he's supposed to do on the shot. But, based on where we were in the running order, like, we were walking the course for days, and he was just right with me.
Yeah.
And I would start to get worked up about, like, oh, there are going to be extra birds over there, or that dog just cleared the course, and it doesn't matter. There was nothing I could do to control what was going on in the field. Mm-hmm. But what I had was a dog that was with me, and I could tell just based on the way that he was walking with me through all that slop. And we were good. I knew what my role was, and he knew what he was going to do, and And I corrected for him on an occasion or two, and then he corrected for me on an occasion or two.
Wow.
And I really have no idea what happened with any other dog in that trial, but I just knew that Bailey and I were having a really good week.
Well, you're lucky in that regard. We're all lucky if we get a feeling like that once in a while. As we close up here, what is it about this whole field trial game that you love so much, Camie?
It's a challenge. I mean, I love being outside. I'm one of 4 girls that grew up with a dad that was a bird hunter. And it's just fascinating to see these dogs do what they were bred to do. And I've come at the sport sort of backwards, but it is an unbelievable community of people that are there for the dogs. They're there for the people, that share their interests. And then when you're out in the field with your dog and you're having a good day, it's the best tie, because there's so many days that are so frustrating that when you get it right, you hang on to that.
Yeah. I love it. How about you, Jim? I mean, you're out there doing it basically for a living. There's got to be some kind of gratifying feeling you get when one of your students, if you will, performs at this level.
Yeah, I mean, there's, we've been fortunate, we've been very fortunate that we've had 4 national amateur championships within our team,
Yeah.
and 3 national open championships. And so, I get a lot, actually 5 if you count the cockers, in the amateur, but I get a lot of satisfaction out of, I just get a lot of satisfaction out of not only getting there myself, but also getting other people to experience that, because it's an incredibly tough thing to do. It's just a really, really tough thing to do. And like Camie said, when you get an animal to that point where it's just everything's clicking and whatnot, it's just so satisfying. But when you can observe it even more, that's cool. So I mean, it's just gratifying seeing the whole training and the experience and all of that really come together. We have a lot of pride in our team. Everybody's within our team. We're very, very happy when each of us do well. We also are there for moral support when it doesn't go so good. And it's kind of like a baseball season. A good baseball season or a really exceptional baseball season is running at 75%. Or higher if you can, or actually, I think probably you're more in the 65%, which isn't that high when you compare it to, say, maybe football. Mm-hmm. So you have to get satisfaction in other things other than just that. You have to get satisfaction in meeting training goals, learning a skill set maybe, or just all those little nuances that you get that are not. This is not an instant gratification sport. If you want that, go play video games. You know what I mean?
I do.
And,
yeah.
And the same thing with upland hunting, or same thing with any hunting, really. It's so these are challenges, and I think I liken it to life in a little bit of the same way that these type of sports are not that far off from some of the life lessons. You're going to get knocked down now and again. You're going to go ahead and have to figure out how to get up and how to figure it out. And, the more you work at it, you're going to have success. And if you've got a good product, then it's going to get even better. But, and it's life lessons. It's just, that's the way it is. And so a lot of the folks that we get involved with are looking to really they're looking to try to improve their game maybe, or just looking to have a really good experience. But our team we all kind of push each other a little bit, and in good ways. And so I don't know, I kind of round about it, I guess, but that's kind of the it's if you want to, you can either try to figure it out or you can just kind of stumble through. And I'd rather figure it out.
Well, when you get it all figured out, send it over to me in a memo, because I could use all the help I can get. Camie, you get the last word here, and it's to other women who own dogs, consider owning dogs, who want to hunt or trial. What would your advice be to them?
Just do it. Just show up and do it. It's sometimes slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it can be tough. I mean, I was a non-hunter that showed up at these trials for the first time, but I wanted to know what it was about, and I just did it. And as a result of doing that, so many good things have come from it. So you got to take that risk. And
you always have your dog at your side, so you always got at least one supporter. That's
not when I started.
That's Camie Barrow. She and her dog Bailey, the Springer Spaniel, won the National Amateur English Spaniel Field Trial Championship last year. Helped in so many ways by Jim Keller of Wild Wind Kennels, who's, let's see, are you all the way there yet, Jim?
In Minnesota, yeah. We pulled all the time we started the call. So.
Okay, so you're safe and sound, and good for you. Good luck to both of you. It sure was fun to learn more about this whole game. Congratulations, and good luck in the future to both of you. Thanks so much for being a part of the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
having us.
And we have a little bit more to cover here, including a question I've been plagued with for a while, and I go back and forth on this one. So stand by for the question on our Upland Nation Insights newsletter last week. Do you use a mobile or an online mapping app? I think you'll be surprised at the answers. But first off, the Upland Nation podcast is brought to you by Pointer Shotguns. New website, pointershotguns.com. Yeah, it's about time that's what they did. I'm glad they did, and I'm flattered that they have some of my videos and some of my articles up there, among other things. Take a look at the full line of shotguns available at pointershotguns.com. Some of the new ones, including some beautiful Cerakoted finishes on all sorts of field guns, as well as some high-end target guns, some youth guns, and soon some more guns to come. So stand by. Keep checking in at pointershotguns.com. Pointer shotguns are a work of art at a price that's a thing of beauty. So I was a little surprised at this, the response to this question on the Upland Nation Insights newsletter. And by the way, if you don't get that, go to findbirdhuntingspots.com, sign up for the mailing list right there, and I'll add you to that list. Every week we got something there of interest to just about everybody, I hope. How do you feel about this? Technology has, pretty much taken over our lives in so many ways. I don't care whether you're investing in crypto or you're just trying to get directions to that fancy restaurant across town. So I asked everybody in the newsletter whether they use one of those online mapping apps. You know which ones I mean. 59% of you say yes. 41% of you say no, which I find fascinating and understand completely. I almost threw my phone out the window a couple times on my most recent trip. Just couldn't get things to work the way I wish they had. Maybe I need to practice more on that, but maybe not. I've learned that there are limitations to that technology, and I don't mean just the fact that sometimes you can't get a cell phone signal, because that isn't the only problem there. Sometimes there are accuracy issues, for example, and currency issues. I've learned the hard way, for example, that public access land is sometimes a couple years behind the curve when it comes to getting from the state program to the mapping apps program. So there are things like that. So 41% of you, for one reason or another, decided it's just not worth it. Never mind. Thanks for responding, by the way. Good, strong response on that one and some of the others we've had lately. Things are going extremely well for you. I hope they continue to be that way, whether you use an online mapping app or not. And with that, I will thank you all for, number one, listening. Thank you all for leaving ratings and reviews. Thank you, Camie Barrow and Jim Keller, for being such a great duo on the podcast today. Learned a lot about field trials and dog psychology from you both. I'll remind you that we're made possible by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays, and Trulock Chokes, as well as findbirdhuntingspots.com, where I'll see you every day. Something there every day for everybody. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the field.